Okay, so we're now recording. I'm just going to broadcast, and then Rebecca, I will pass it over to you. Okay. So webinar's now live, and we're starting to get attendees coming in. That is working. I'll just give it a sec for a bit more people to get in. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We have Rebecca Smith, who is the CEO at Huddersfield. And we also have Lydia Blundell, who is Head of Engagement at Huddersfield. They're doing a session on using data to set targets and increase engagement. So I'll just hand it over to Rebecca. So I'm just making you a host now, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And you're now the host.
Okay.
So you should be able to activate your camera.
Yeah, I'll try it. Yes, I can. Hi. Hello, everyone. If there's any problems with hearing me, just let me know. And obviously, I'm hoping the screen sharing, is it sharing, Lydia?
Yeah, it's all sharing fine.
Right, great. Okay. Thanks for joining us. If you would like to put anything in the chat to say hello or ask questions as I go along, please do. Lydia will try and respond to any as they come up. And if there's anything left at the end, obviously we'll pick that up. But yes, just keep typing just so that we know there are people out there. I'm Rebecca. I'm the Chief Exec, as Lewis said, at Huddersfield Students' Union. Lydia's going to say a few words as well halfway through the presentation to help me, because she did a lot of this work and I'm claiming the glory. So hopefully it's just to kind of talk through what we did at Huddersfield using data to inform our strategy. And I know lots of other people use data in lots of wonderful ways, but this is just our way of doing it. And hopefully it's of use to some of you out there. So I'll make a start. For those of you that aren't from the north, maybe, I'll just quickly say something about Huddersfield University. I can move my, it's not letting me move my slides, Lewis. Ah, it is now. So this is Huddersfield University, or part of Huddersfield University. It's one of those, it's part of the University Alliance, Huddersfield, and it's one of those kind of mid-sized universities that sits between Manchester and Leeds and north of Sheffield. So it's really kind of in the middle of a triangle of some really large Russell Group universities and some other kind of medium-sized universities as well. And it's kind of renowned, I suppose, particularly because it got a gold TEF in the initial rating of the TEF. And also it's got more PhD academic staff than any other university in the country, I think, at the moment. For those of you, you might have seen it in the news last year, because we were also became known for the fact that the Chancellor of Huddersfield was Prince Andrew. So that created quite an interesting debate, and we were in the middle of a global storm for a while, which made all our lives very interesting. But yes, lots of things about Huddersfield. A really strong university in terms of challenging, you know, in a kind of really competitive sector. And you know, and in a very sort of difficult position in lots of ways in terms of its location. The other thing to probably say actually on this slide is on that, where we are as a students' union is in that middle section of that building. So we're on the first floor. We have a very small space. There's no bar, very little, you know, kind of space in terms of doing physical activities. We have an advice service, a lettings agency, and then downstairs to kind of give us a bit more promotion is the shop, which is underneath, which we run as well. So it's always a challenge for us in terms of that kind of physical understanding of who our students are, because they're not naturally there in front of us using our spaces or anything like that. So again, that kind of makes data even more important in what we do, so we can understand who is engaging with us. And then if I just show you that, this is a kind of summary of the population of the university. So just a couple of things to point out: high commuter levels, over half the students are commuters. And on the other side of that, 23% are international students, which is a really high number for this type of university. So you've got a real kind of, you know, difference between those two groups of students, and less of your traditional students in the middle. So I thought I'd start almost at the end of the presentation, and that's really kind of talking about what we have achieved over the last couple of years. And this is kind of one way of putting it simply. When talking about that building, like as I did in the previous slide, the SU moved into that building sort of 2013-14, and actually lost a lot of its kind of physical location. And that did start to have an impact, I think, on the engagement levels, and we started to see a decline. And when I arrived in 2017, there was, you know, definite signs that that decline could continue unless we did things to, you know, to reverse it significantly. And of course, the thing about the membership of clubs and societies, which is what this graph is about, is that often then reflects how many students then vote in the elections, because it's only the ones that are really engaged with you that understand the point of voting and being part of the students' union. So we were seeing that same kind of decline going on in other areas of our work, and you know, it's important that we turn that round. So that was a kind of key thought process when we were looking at our new strategy. And so 2017, I arrived, and then we kind of had a year to form a strategy. And it looked a bit onerous, because you'll see there that we've said on our strategic plan, it's a 7-year strategy. That was really to kind of realign it with the university, because they were also going through their strategic plan at the same time, and they were putting theirs to 2025. So although 7 years, as we all know, particularly at the moment with what can happen, is far too long to predict things, we recognised that we needed a kind of overarching principle of what we were trying to do. And then we really gave ourselves sort of the last 2 years, and this is the end of year 2 that we've just completed, to kind of realign what we were doing, you know, make sure we were going in the right direction, and really test a few things. And then that kind of gave us, you know, sort of more direction for where the rest of the strategy would go. So in terms of the data side, I suppose, just to say at this point, I mean, there was a really good data agreement in place with the university. They have been really helpful in terms of the SU and providing that data. And the only areas where we really have gaps has always been with commuter students, and with the kind of ethnic profile, ethnicity profile as well. So Lydia will kind of mention what, you know, the issues around that later. But the SU had been using data. It was there. There was someone who left just before I arrived who had been kind of analysing data and looking at it. But I think the thing I found coming in new to the organisation was it was really complicated, and I wasn't using it in terms of informing the strategy, and I wasn't kind of seeing the rest of the team using it either. So I knew that while it was there, we just hadn't put it into a, you know, state that was accessible, and that was the thing that we really wanted to do as part of the new strategic plan. So we started writing the strategy. The vision was all about really sort of focusing on how we add value to the university experience by developing personal and life skills. And that's what really came across from our students, that's what they wanted us to do and be there for, in whatever form was right for them. So our vision was about, by 2025, all Huddersfield students will agree that we help to develop the life skills they need to make and shape their future. they will understand and value being part of the Huddersfield Students' Union community. And obviously this word community, I think, is being used more and more, you know, because people want to belong, they want to feel they belong to something, and they do have a place of value on that in terms of the university experience, which I think for all of us this year is going to be a big challenge. But yes, so that was in there. And I suppose the other thing to say there was, we were saying all Huddersfield students. So we knew at that point that we had to get engagement levels up, but also we needed the data to understand more about what all our students look like and who we were engaging with at that point, as we started on this strategy. So there was kind of two sides to what we were trying to do. One was data-led and one's impact-led in our strategic plan. So obviously today's about data. So I just wanted to really quickly highlight that the impact-led part of what we do is equally, if not more important, but we need the data in order to do it. So as you can see there, we talk about a longitudinal survey. So this is us, we're now monitoring every year a number of our very engaged students, and they're feeding back to us, and that's once they've left university as well as while they're at university, to help us understand how the skills that we've identified with them, how that they learn through the Students' Union, how they are using those and how they are having a long-term impact on what they do. So that piece of work is one of our key KPIs. And then on the other side is the data-led KPI of what we're doing. So what we wanted to do with the data was really kind of put it into something that made sense to us all. And so we've got 3 stages to our data. And with that, 3 sort of distinct targets. So the first stage is about creating connections with students. So this is really looking at every single way we can have an interaction with a student, whether it's them regularly opening our emails, to using our advice service once, to voting in the elections, to attending an event. So they're connecting with us, but we can't say in any way that that helps inform their skills and personal development. And then the second stage to this engagement is about creating communities. So this is where students are regularly engaging with us, and this is the kind of core part, the heart of what we do as a Students' Union. So this is our members, our active members of clubs and societies. These are the people that will submit a big idea because they want to make a change. They'll be part of our student staff cohort. They'll volunteer for something in our advice service. So there's a whole range of things in that community. And our target is that by the end of our strategy, that over half, 60% of students at Huddersfield will engage with us in this way. And then the final part of this is about creating change. So these are our students who are really, really engaged with us, that do deliver something that really makes a difference. And they're the ones that we were identifying in our impact work as well. So these are the academic reps who've actually created a change that we can identify, not just become an academic rep, but made a change. These are the people that stand in the elections, that take part in some sort of big piece of training we do, like our Inspiring Future Leaders programme, or are part of our liberation networks. So that's that kind of top 20% is what we're aspiring to at the moment. That's kind of less than 5%, but they're the ones that we really want to engage with us. So that's what we kind of set up. Oops. And yeah, and then what we had in there with our mission is that's what we wanted to create. So what we needed to do was kind of align that with what we were talking about in our mission, so everyone could see how the two things linked. So our mission is to make student life better. So that's really simple. And that was something that's been there before this strategy. And we use that as a simple tagline. But then we added this sentence as part of our mission, so that when we're inducting staff, or when people want to see what we're trying to deliver in terms of our strategy, you can see how this aligns to those 3 stages that we're using our data for. So we talk about that we'll work together to create personal connections, inclusive communities, and meaningful change. And as I say, it then kind of links in that mission with what we're trying to do with our community engagement measure. just before I kind of hand over to Lydia to sort of talk about some of the practicalities of doing all this and actually turning that visual triangle into something that really worked in terms of data. The other bit of the data jigsaw that we had in place already was the segmentation of our students. So Lydia had already done this work before I arrived at Huddersfield, and had kind of identified 4 groups or 4 characteristics of our students that we could kind of use to communicate with them or identify gaps in our services to make sure that we were covering all those segments. And when I started kind of looking at the strategy, already Lydia had set in place the fact that there would be 4 key or killer questions, as they call it, within the enrolment process for students as they were starting at university. And those questions, with a few kind of sub questions, meant that with kind of 70-80% accuracy, we could place them within our 4 segments, and that gave us another characteristic to include within our data that we were developing. So that was already there and part of what we were trying to achieve in terms of the characteristics that we were monitoring in our data. Right, I'll hand over to Lydia now. So Lydia can't come on the video, unfortunately. So this screen shows Lydia, and also, if it is to the right, I'm never sure when we're presenting, Kelly. And Kelly was someone who actually helped us put together the data into a format that really worked for us. And she's someone who kind of does consultancy work and managed to understand what we were trying to achieve. So Lydia, can I hand over to you, please?
Hi everyone, so hopefully you can all hear me, even though you can't see me today. So I just thought I'd give a bit of background as to how we sort of set up this system. So as Rebecca mentioned, we worked with an external consultant, Kelly, to build the system, and it all works through an Access database which is set up for us. It pulls together automatically the triangle, which you saw previously in the slides, as well as a whole series of different graphs looking at all the different demographics that we've got, as well as the totals for each of the different projects that we run. It keeps both a tally of the unique student interactions as well as the number of times a student engages with us. So it might be that one student engages 20 times across the year in our events, and we can see both of those different setups. So it pulls in the data set that we get from the university, and as Rebecca mentioned earlier, we're really lucky with the data share agreement that we've managed to put in place with the university. We do have access to quite a lot of data, and whether that's gender, age, commuter status, all sorts of different things, but we don't currently get ethnicity data. The university have said that because it's a protected characteristic, they're not willing to ask students to get consent for that data set, but that is something we will continue to work on, because we think it's a really important area for us to understand the barriers to students engaging and the different areas that students are engaging in our work. So as I said, we record every single interaction that a student has with the Students' Union, and that could be everything from booking onto an event, to attending a training session, to opening our emails, and all of this gets pulled into an overarching spreadsheet, which is then uploaded into this database. That can include anything from 30,000 to 50,000 to even more different individual data sets across the year. We did invest in a number of scanners and tablets for our staff team to take when they're out and about on campus. This means that they can collect student numbers directly by scanning their student ID cards, which just sort of reduces the problems that we have with some of the quality of the student numbers that we get. Throughout the year, we are able to add in additional projects, and that is something that we've seen the staff team really get on board with as we've introduced this system. They're really, really keen. Every time they get a new bit of data, they get really excited and ask where it's going to sit in the triangle, and embed that into all the spreadsheets, which is, it's really brilliant when someone comes to you with a new piece of data that they're excited about. Some of the challenges that we have with this system, certainly the biggest challenge that we see is the discrepancy in collecting student numbers. And this can include wrong student numbers that have simply been typed in incorrectly, or it can include false student numbers where perhaps a student hasn't wanted to give their student number. We often see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 quite a few times. But the other kind of challenge that we see with this is students using their personal email addresses, which means that we can't do the lookups to find them in the university data sets. And it does mean that sometimes the numbers in the triangle that we see don't always add up to the demographics that we see. So that's kind of one complication that we see. Another challenge is some of our report generating is still quite manual, so you still have to kind of go into some of the individual graphs and manually look across those, but that's something we're hoping to develop this next year. And then the other kind of challenge that we've seen is working out across the year all the different data sets that we have access to. So often we'll kind of realise halfway through the year that we've collected something new and we need to add in a new project. And it's meant that some of our benchmarking has had to change as we progress throughout the year. But it's always a nice challenge to have more data than you thought you would have. So that's really positive for us. So Rebecca, I'll hand back across to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. And if you've got any questions, folks, just put them in the chat. Okay, so I'm going to try and show you what it actually looks like for the team in terms of what we all see when we're looking at the data, so you can kind of visualize it, because that's always best for me anyway. So if you can see where they've got this orange circle, that's just kind of highlighting where it's worth looking. So all our team can access. One of the things was that the data has to be accessible to all of our managers and our, the rest of our team, but particularly the managers, because it couldn't be about someone creating reports to hand out. It had to be live information that everyone went into and used when it suited them. It wasn't about writing reports. That was one thing I was really keen to sort of avoid. So this is live information that any of our team can access at any time. And it looks like this. So it's really simple to read. You've got the pink bars are the total membership that we could have access to in the university, and the blue numbers are the actuals that we've got, and that's obviously with the caveats that Lydia was talking about, like if we're getting wrong information from various places, but essentially we're getting most of as near 100% potential access as we can get. So you can see there at the top it says level 1. So as you saw with the triangle, which I'll come back to in a minute, and we call it the triangle or the community engagement measure, or some other people probably have rude names for it, but yes, so our triangle, it has 3 levels. So level 1 is about those creating connections, so that's the most students we connect with. So when someone looks at these graphs, they're looking at all the students that we connect with across all the different areas by different characteristics, which I'll come to in a moment. So you can see obviously the connections are large numbers of students, and actually this year we're up there in the 90s in terms of how many do make a connection with us. Oops, not moving again. Right, this one you can see is level 3. So that's when you remember when I was talking earlier about the small group at the top that we're trying to reach, the 20% who really are the change makers in the organisation. This is them now as they stand when this graph was live. And so again, you can start seeing how many of our students and what type of students are our change makers within our organisation, and that starts to inform that side of things. So that's kind of things you can see within the graphs themselves. Then you can start to see the characteristics within the graph. So there you can see we can all look at students by the segments that they're in, by the areas of study, by which country they're from. I'll come back to the commuter ones a bit later because that's something new, but also we can see them by school, we can see them by gender, you know, whatever. It's all those characteristics that we've already got from the university that we're then breaking down into sort of meaningful information for our teams. And then if you're in a team of a particular area, so this area is about academic representation, the manager of that area can start looking at what is specifically they need to know about the students who are engaging with them and their team. So here, Heather, who manages this area, will look at this graph and see that of all the academic reps we've got, she can see which schools they're in, who they are in terms of their age, what, you know, whether they're international or UK, what segment they come from as well. And for most of our teams, they will have they'll have people in the connection level, but they'll also have people in the community level and possibly the creating change level as well. So for academic reps, it's a clear journey. So Heather can look at how many are actually signed up as academic reps as part of the connections, but then if she goes into her next area, so it's actually trained academic reps, she can then see how many of those reps have trained with her and which schools they're from and who they are. Or this one, which is the most engaged academic reps, which is our third tier, she again can see which students tend to do that. And then you can see on that slide, each area's got lots of different groupings so that those teams can look at different things. So for our events team, they can group it by family-friendly activities and see which students have come to those, by our liberation groups. You know, there's all sorts of things. But each manager's got their own either 1, 2, 3, however many different areas of work that they've chosen that they can analyse in the graphs. And then this is how it all looks in a very simple way. And for me, when I'm sort of doing reporting to the board and things like that, I kind of use this. You can't make it any more simple. But it's essentially saying, you know, that's our targets for this year. And they look like nice round numbers, but there's some method behind them, and so I'll show you in a minute. And that's what we've actually achieved this year. So it's pretty simple to see how we're doing, you know, without having to kind of go through lots of details and lots of reports. Behind that, obviously, it's not quite so simple. So this is the breakdown of each of those 3 layers. And as you can see, each team's got some targets in there. It then talks about the actual numbers that they've achieved and what the variance is. It looks very kind of salesy and, you know, like we've all got these big number targets that everyone's chasing. People set their own targets. If someone feels like one area is not going to do so well in a year, they'll say, actually, I want to move that number down this year, but I'm going to focus on engaging more of the students I've already got, which is one thing that we did with academic reps last year. So people tweak the numbers, you know, they kind of look at what they want to do, and that's for the managers and their teams. Or obviously for me, I just want to know that we're still going up. I don't really mind where that is and what it looks like. I just want to know that we're still increasing engagement across the board. And then this is kind of a summary of what I've just shown you in a slightly more simple form, in that this is what we do every month. So every month we have this to kind of tell us all where we're at, you know, and the nice thing about it is it slowly goes up as the months go on in the academic year, and we can see where things are working and perhaps where we want to adjust things. And we use this to talk about what we want to do differently. And it's all about being agile. None of this is about waiting until the end of, you know, 3 or 4 months to decide what we need to change doing. The other thing I just kind of wanted to talk about was how we use data in a, I don't know what's the word, more political way probably. It's great that like the team, you know, the team use it and we use it as an organisation to sort of make sure, you know, we're on the right track and we're doing the right things. But actually, it's also really important that we've got data so that we can talk to schools, talk to other people in the university about our successes, but also the things that aren't working and how they can help us with those. So one of the first things, once this was up and running for the first year, I did a trip round all the school boards and basically did a presentation about what we were trying to achieve with our strategy. But I pulled this off for each of the schools to sort of create a bit of awareness and a bit of competition between the schools as well. So this is an example of what that looks like. You'll have to excuse the quality of it. So human and health sciences, obviously what you can see from the blue lines on that graph are one of the largest schools in Huddersfield. So what we were trying to show to them was, although they were one of the largest schools, the level of engagement was quite a bit lower overall. And that was, I mean, for a whole host of reasons, but, you know, as you can imagine, a lot of the courses in human and health, like nursing, midwifery, podiatry, things like that, there was a lot of work placements and it was harder for them to engage. But if you look at the sort of very simple summary on the left-hand side, you know, I was able to say, look, these are the things that are going really well with your students. So there's more sports club members, they're engaging more in our night and daytime events, more of them are using our Hudlets agency for accommodation. But here's some of the areas where we need to find solutions to how we might engage them more. So there's two things there that we particularly sort of wanted to talk about. The big ideas interactions is obviously when students put forward ideas for change, and we know, you know, for some of those students, you know, they do have lots of issues. It's not that they haven't, but maybe they just weren't using the student union to raise them. So we kind of had a conversation about how we might get them more, you know, active in terms of engaging with us. But the one that really worked was that engaging in an academic society. So we were able to have a whole conversation with them about the fact that their students weren't engaging in the academic societies that we had as much as other schools were, and how we might be able to kind of improve that. Because we knew we had the societies, there were people coming forward to be committee members, but then the student cohort wasn't necessarily engaging with them, and they were struggling with what to do in terms of events. And we had one person for all academic societies, so they were really struggling in terms of how much resource to put in it. So we came to an agreement that we'd jointly fund a member of staff that would just support the academic societies in human and health. And obviously we then reflected that in our targets for this last year and have seen a big increase in the number of students who are engaging in the academic societies in human and health sciences. So this data was absolutely key to starting that conversation, because we could show them exactly where the issues were in terms of engagement. Another conversation that we have a lot of the time is about international students. We're in a sort of quite challenging situation in that the international societies are now run by the International Office and not the Students' Union, and that's been going on for a number of years before I came to Huddersfield. And of course, you know, that's going to create issues in terms of integration, when you've got, you know, some societies being kind of run in one space and other societies in another. So this has been really helpful for us to understand where international students were connecting with us and what else we could do. And it was also really helpful for me to have those conversations with the university that are a bit more challenging. So this one here, you can see that 21% of international students are connecting with the Students' Union. When you think that the entire population at the university is around 22-23%, we knew they were making that connection with us. We knew they were trying to do something with us, even if it was only regularly reading our communication. And then that sort of dropped, you know, when it came to certain activities, particularly general societies and sports clubs. So we were able to show that and kind of start having that conversation with the university about the fact that, you know, is it right to have those societies separate, because actually it would aid integration, because there's clearly international students out there who want to engage with us. And then this is the whole thing about being agile and using data, is that you're constantly looking for new ways to use the data and add to it and develop what we're doing. So this year we managed to get the HESA information from the university about commuter students, and we've started to populate our data with information about commuter students in schools and general activity with the union. And I'm sure, like most other SUs, if there's any out there that it's different for, I'd love to hear from you and get some advice. But obviously the commuter students generally engage less with us than the students who are living away from home. But now that we've got that data this year, we're able to start unpicking that. And I think, as you'll all agree, this is going to become more and more key, particularly over the next year, because for universities like ours, we imagine we'll see more commuter students, you know, students staying at home if they can, and we need to make sure that we're doing activities that make them sort of want to do things with the Students' Union. So that's lots of numbers and data. The most important thing is our staff and our students, and them understanding and wanting to kind of buy into this whole idea. And we have the most amazing team, and this, you know, data is just something to help them. It's not something to sort of make life more difficult for them. But we kind of wanted to make it more visible. So this is in our office. We've got a curved wall, which is why it looks a slightly strange shape, but we've actually put something up in the office. It's a big open plan space to where all the teams can actually write an update of where they're at, and it gives us a conversation point, and it's something visual and simple that we can all kind of relate to. Yeah, and it seems to work. Some people make a joke about it, you know, no, not that triangle again. But you can see from there, you know, that there are numbers that are being sort of updated all the time. And I'm looking forward to getting back into the office so we can actually do some of this again. And in terms of that sort of culture and that buy-in from our staff, this is a way, just wanted to show you how we use it in our planning sessions. So, you know, when we'll have a kind of termly planning session, you know, we'll kind of look at the data and maybe challenge each other about what could we do differently, and use that data to sort of express that. So you can see there everything from, you know, looking at our academic reps, how do we get more of our PGTs to create change? On Give It a Go, we talk about segmentation. How do we get more Jordans and Allies, so there are quieter and more mature students, to join in? So that often creates a debate about, let's look at the events we're doing again and make sure we're doing the right things. Our advice centre, it's overrepresented by international students. That's something that the advice team always thought, but this really articulates that in a very visual way. So we can talk about, you know, is that the right balance? Should we be talking to the university more? All sorts of things like that. And that bottom one, which was us coming up with something for the shop team to feel like they were part of this as well. So someone came up with this brilliant idea about put a swipe card machine as you queue up in the shop, and then if people have got ideas for new products or just want to give us some feedback, they just swipe their card as they're stood in the queue, and then we get back in touch with them. So that was kind of asking questions about that, and, you know, sort of checking that we were responding to those ideas and what sort of things we were saying. And then finally, this is a bit bad quality again, apologies, but we even this last elections used that data to set ourselves some sort of team targets for trying to engage more voters in the elections. Again, this was the teams that set these targets, and what we did is they came up with the numbers of what they'd like to get, the ideal, you know, number of percentage of students from their areas voting in the elections. We kind of then put that into an overall target number of votes. which was a massive jump. It was 2,000 extra votes. We didn't quite achieve that. We achieved an extra 1,000 votes, but it gave us all something to talk about, you know, and we celebrated when some of those, when some of those targets were getting close. So, you know, that was just another way we were able to use that data almost to bring us all together. So just final thing, I had my annual 360 appraisal a couple of weeks ago, and I think about 20-25 of our staff filled it in, and there was, for me, it was just really nice, because the data is just one part of what we do, but it was nice to see how that kind of language was coming through in some of the feedback about, you know, things about me, and the successes of us as an organisation. So one of the quotes was, embedding the community engagement measure triangle has been successful, and we can visually see the numbers of engagement increasing. This has helped with the development of the SU. So that was from one member of the team. And then more importantly, and what's ideally the next step in all this, is much more about cultural change. And there was a quote saying, the culture feels much more open and understanding, supporting and collective, like we're all going in the same direction. And I think that's what data really should be about. It's helping with that rather than making people feel it's just another form of reporting. And that's it. Any questions? I can't see the chat at the moment, so I need to come out and I'll maybe do that.
Rebecca, if you press the Q&A button at the bottom, you'll see that we've got 3 questions on there. So once you've answered them, just click answer live.
Okay, fab. So hello everyone, because I haven't said hello because I'm concentrating. Charlene, do you have any other examples where data has resulted in increase in participation in societies or student groups? Any other examples of participation? So obviously I talked about clubs and societies. What else? Lydia, what else would you say as examples? Is there anything on the voice side?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest one to track for us is the academic reps, and seeing them. So we count it as, if you're an academic rep, then you've connected. As soon as you've taken part in our training, you've moved into that community. And then once you've started to kind of do something or take part in further events and activities, then you become one of those change makers. And this previous year, nearly a third of our academic reps have moved into that change makers category, and that's a significant increase from what we've seen in previous years. So we're really pleased with that shift, that once we get them trained and we can get them into part of that community, that we can then enable them to go on and create change, and that's a really useful one that we've been able to share with the academic staff, and sort of show them that just by giving us an academic rep's name doesn't mean that they're doing anything or that they're taking on that extra additional responsibility. So that's been a really useful kind of example where we've seen an increase in participation.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's not always about increasing numbers, which I was saying earlier. It's about seeing how we move students from a kind of, you know, ad hoc connection with us to someone who's more fully engaged, and that's been the focus, rather than just getting more students connected with us. So yeah, you know, that's the academic rep side's really good, and we've just had the NSS results. We've just had another increase, which has been a really positive thing for us. We're already in the kind of top quartile in terms of that NSS questions 26, but we've just gone up a few places again. So, you know, you can kind of see the impact of that more generally. Runsi, hi. Successful communication strategy or channel you've used for data collection from students. I mean, obviously, a lot of this is about the fact that we're lucky enough that we're getting, you know, the initial data from the university. I suppose a good example of that would be that we used the segmentation information to message our voting in the elections. So we sent out a slightly different email to our 4 segments to try and encourage them to vote. You know, because obviously we were appealing to different reasons with different groups. So if you were one of our SAMs who are very social and usually a member of a club or society, they kind of, you know, they understand more about why they should vote. But then when we're trying to appeal to one of the other groups, it was more about social conscience, you know, kind of the wider issues in society, and, you know, trying to get them to understand by voting in a student election, it was the first step in civic engagement. So we messaged all of that, you know, quite differently, and we saw a much higher click-through rate in terms of voting when we did that than when we just sent out one generic email to all students. So that's probably an example above and beyond what I've been talking about today. Catriona, hi. How did you initially get this up and running? What steps did you take? How long? So I suppose, you know, as I say, there had been some work going on, but actually didn't take us that long. What, I don't know, 3-4 months, Lydia, by the time we worked out what we wanted. Would you say?
Yeah, I think the actual build probably took a couple of months of us kind of going back and forth, tweaking and getting everything designed. We then, so I think, yeah, I think that was sort of term 1, and then term 2 of the year was us kind of working out all the different types of data that we had and getting everything into the right place, and then we fully rolled it out the following year. So to get it to a point where it was finished, it's probably taken a couple of years, but yeah, certainly the build was only a couple of months.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you mean by engaged students? Oh, it's my favourite subject. So that was really what this triangle's all about. Do you mean students who are actively shaping the SU's agenda, or do you mean someone who just participates? Okay, so we all decided what we mean by engaged students. That's, you know, and everyone's going to come at it slightly differently, but for us, we had those conversations, and we kind of just, it's moved a bit, and it probably will continue to move, but you know, it is as a very basic, there's a connection is a kind of one-off thing. As I was saying earlier, our community are people who are regularly taking part in some form of activity, and are properly creating change. Engaged students are the change makers. There's almost like a demonstrable output from what they do, whether it is about representation and tracking that change, or whether it's that they've been a committee member and they've taken part in the training that's involved in being a committee member and they've run that society. So yeah, I mean, engagement means lots of different things, but I suppose we just see it as a hierarchy that we're always trying to move people up, and the connection bit is just the awareness raising of who we are and what we do, and you know, that's not really being an engaged student to us. How do you get such good data sharing agreement with the institution? Oh, I don't know. Lydia's good at being nice to people. How do you do that, Lydia? How did we get that?
Yeah, and I suppose in a way we were fairly lucky in that we had a good data sharing agreement in place before the new GDPR regulations came in, which meant we were in a good kind of negotiating position really to keep hold of that data. But yeah, really it is a lot of sweet talking the university secretary and the legal team, and you know, making sure that they know what we're doing with the data set. So every time we ask for a new set of data, I have to demonstrate what we're doing with it, who has access to it, how it's going to be locked down, those types of things. So yeah, it's kind of partly good negotiating and partly a bit of good luck as well, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and we're careful, I suppose, you know, so I don't think there's anything been done in the past that has made the university nervous, you know, and certainly on the GDPR stuff, we were kind of very proactive in making sure that they knew what we were, you know, the steps we were taking around that. So yeah, and I think part of this is we're demonstrating how we're using it in an effective way. So for them, it's very hard for them to say no unless it's genuinely a legal reason that they're saying no to not let us have something else. So yeah, it's been good. Paul, just a quick question regarding language. Yeah, so I think I was kind of talking about this before. When communicating with students, you refer to engagement or connections. I think we refer to community more than anything. You know, we're trying to talk about being part of our community and the value of that in terms of your own development. So we'll talk about engaging. We don't really talk about connecting with us. That for us that's just our kind of internal language about how we're defining, you know, what students are doing with us. But yeah, I think community is the word that really we use as much as possible when we're talking to students. I think that's everything.
One of the questions, sorry, that came in via live chat a while ago was from Oscar Clark around how do you plug the data into the Excel and how often would you update the data, e.g. university demographics, or is it a live connection?
Yeah. Lydia, do you want to do that one?
Yeah, of course. So at the moment, it's not live. We pull the university demographics off about a couple of times a term. Certainly it tends to be more in the first term when we're getting more enrolments, and just to capture those late starters sort of throughout October. So I pull that off the spreadsheet, and then it pulls it in through the Access database. One of the things I am looking at next year is setting up an API so that it does just pull through automatically, because sometimes when we look at it we realise it's not necessarily pulled in the most recent set of data. So that is something sort of as the next phase of the project we're hoping to pull in, but at the moment it's sort of monthly that we do it, and we update the database on a monthly basis, and that's to line up with our monthly operations meeting that all of our staff attend, so we're able to use the triangle in the office, you know, sort of pre-lockdown, and update everybody on a monthly basis that way as well.
Was there anything else before we all disappear?
I think that was all the questions I saw on the chat.
Okay.
How has COVID affected the data? Has just come in from Queen Saxon.
It's gone really quiet. I mean, obviously we all know that timing of COVID is probably the best possible timing for an SU in terms of we've done, you know, the lion's share of our activity, but no, we've continued to update it. So Lydia's been doing that. You know, we've had committee elections, which meant a big update in there. Our advice service is obviously being used more than ever at the moment. Those numbers are still going in. You know, so yeah, it's business as usual in terms of updating that information and giving us a year-end number that we know is as accurate as possible.
And then you got one more, which will probably be the last one that's coming from the QAA, or the question answer. So
right.
Who updates the database, and is it down to the individual managers or the insights team?
Yeah, there isn't technically an insights team. We don't have one. So Lydia, do you want to just explain how people update it?
Yeah, so each individual staff member collects their own data set and then saves that in our shared drive. We've then got a member of staff who sort of cleans that up, makes sure that all the student numbers are in the right format, and you know, those types of things, and just tidies it into one overall spreadsheet. And then every month I upload that into the system. But it's certainly, we've built the system to be as simple as possible, so anybody could log in and refresh it and update those data sets if they wanted to. We've currently got it locked down just so that nobody breaks it, but it would be fairly simple to give that control over to anybody within the organisation. It doesn't need to sit within a specific kind of insight role or anything like that.
Yeah, and that was key to what we were trying to do, really, as part of it. Are we
Nice.
done? If anyone's got any other questions, you know, please get in touch. It's r.smith@hud.ac.uk. So more than welcome to email me about anything. Yeah, and I hope it's useful. And I'd love to hear if anyone else has got some great ideas about how they've used data, because it would really help us.
Cool. I'd like to thank both Rebecca and Lydia. I know I found it really insightful, and based on the comments, a lot of people have found it really insightful as well. In terms of, someone asked about, would the presentation be available? So the actual webinar will be made available so people can replay it, and I'm sure if you're very nice and email Rebecca, she might send you the presentation as well. But that is it. Thank you for coming, and obviously check out all the sessions that we've got the rest of the week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks everyone, bye.